Hidden captive. Anna's silent plea for rescue in General Hospital's most dangerous game. In the shadowy corridors of Port Charles, a deception of extraordinary proportions unfolds while the city sleeps in blissful ignorance. Anna Devane, the legendary WSB agent and former police commissioner who has survived decades of espionage, treachery, and international intrigue, now finds herself imprisoned in one of the most unlikely locations imaginable, trapped within the very walls of Windermere, the Gothic mansion on Spoon Island. While her colleagues and friends believe Anna is away on a classified WSB assignment, the truth is far more sinister. She has been abducted, drugged, and held captive by forces far more calculated and dangerous than anyone in Port Charles realizes. The kidnapping that nobody saw coming. The night of Anna's disappearance began like any other, with the former commissioner driving through Port Charles, her mind preoccupied with the unsettling theories that had been consuming her attention for weeks. Anna had become convinced that Caesar Faison, the notorious villain who supposedly died 7 years prior, had somehow managed to return from the grave. This suspicion was not born from paranoia or overactive imagination, but from cold, observable facts. Both Britt Westburn and Nathan West, two individuals she knew to be deceased, had mysteriously reappeared in Port Charles around the same time. Anna's investigative instincts were sharp as ever, and she was determined to uncover the truth behind these impossible resurrections. However, her investigation would come to an abrupt and terrifying halt. As she sat in her car, focused on her thoughts, a figure in black leather gloves emerged from the shadows. The attacker moved with surgical precision, trained, methodical, and utterly ruthless. Within seconds, Anna caught the metallic glint of something in her peripheral vision before the sickly sweet smell of chloroform filled her nostrils. The drug worked quickly, consuming her consciousness in a wave of darkness from which she would not awaken in familiar surroundings. When Anna's eyes finally opened, she found herself in a strange room, not a dungeon or basement, as one might expect, but rather a surprisingly comfortable space complete with a kitchen, a rack of clothes, and even a yoga mat. The civility of her prison made it all the more unsettling, for it suggested that whoever had taken her had specific intentions far more complex than simple revenge. Piecing together the puzzle. In the days following her kidnapping, Anna's training took over. Despite her precarious situation, she methodically began documenting everything she could remember about her abduction. Using a notebook, she filled page after page with clues, fragments of memory that might lead to her captor's identity. She recalled being transported by water, suggesting her location was accessible by ferry or boat. The detail was crucial, for it narrowed down the possibilities in Port Charles. She pondered the significance of Britt and Nathan's sudden returns from the dead, wondering if their reappearances were connected to her current nightmare. Anna's mind, sharp despite her chemically induced captivity, began to form a theory. Caesar Faison's shadow still hung over Port Charles, orchestrating events from beyond the grave, or perhaps not truly dead at all. But as Anna continued her investigation from within her gilded cage, she was jolted by a sound footsteps in her prison, a voice speaking in French giving her orders to remain still and keep her face to the wall. The man who entered her room was Pascal, the same individual who had served as a handyman at the Five Poppies resort in Dalmatia, Croatia, where Britt had been held. His presence confirmed something terrifying. Anna's abduction was not an isolated event, but rather part of a larger, coordinated conspiracy that stretched across international borders. Pascal brought her fruit, treated her with a strange mixture of courtesy and control, but his presence only deepened Anna's resolve to understand why she had been taken and by whom. The man behind the curtain. The realization came like a piece of a puzzle clicking into place. If Pascal was her captor, then someone far more powerful had orchestrated her kidnapping. The evidence pointed unmistakably to Sidwell, the sophisticated businessman who had been orchestrating complex schemes throughout Port Charles. Sidwell was no ordinary antagonist. He possessed Helena Casadine's ruthlessness merged with Caesar Faison's obsessive precision. Combined with access to modern technology, that the original villains could never have imagined. Anna was not being held captive for ransom or simple revenge. She was being studied, analyzed, and dissected like a specimen in a laboratory. The reason was chilling. Anna was the one mind that neither Helena nor Faison had ever successfully broken. Her mental resilience, her ability to resist conditioning, her capacity to maintain her sense of self despite chemical and psychological torture made her invaluable to Sidwell's grand design. He intended to extract the secret of her durability and replicate it, creating an army of operatives whose minds could not be fractured even under the most intense pressure. Anna represented the template for a new generation of perfect agents, and Sidwell was willing to hold her indefinitely to unlock the secrets locked within her consciousness. The deception that keeps Port Charles blind. While Anna struggled to understand her imprisonment, the machinery of deception continued to operate seamlessly on the streets of Port Charles. Her phone continued sending carefully timed messages and automated responses, crafted to mimic her voice and speech patterns with eerie accuracy, suggesting she was away on a classified WSB assignment. Jack Brennan, the WASB chief, received a cryptic voicemail from what appeared to be Anna herself, though the audio was corrupted and fragmented, stating only that she was in danger and needed his silence. Her colleagues received sporadic text messages and emails, all perfectly executed to maintain the illusion of her continued presence in official circles. The deception was masterful because it exploited the very nature of Anna's profession. As a WSB agent, her disappearances were not unusual. Classified missions, undercover operations, sudden reassignments, these were all standard aspects of her work. When her colleagues noticed her absence, they simply assumed she had been called away for something important. Dante Falconeri, who had been elevated to acting police commissioner in her absence, accepted the explanation without questioning. Even those closest to her, like her granddaughter Emma, received messages reassuring them that Anna was fine, that she had been summoned for an important operation overseas, that she would return when the mission was complete. Jason's awakening, the rescue that must happen. But there is one person in Port Charles whose trust Anna earned in a way few others have. Jason Morgan, the man she once told she trusted completely. As days turned to weeks, someone would eventually notice the inconsistencies, the gaps in Anna's communication patterns, the subtle wrongness of her absence. Felicia, Anna's longtime friend, possessed the training and the instinct to sense when something was genuinely wrong versus when Anna was simply away on business. Jordan Ashford, with her law enforcement background, would eventually begin asking questions that couldn't be easily answered. But most importantly, Jason would realize that the woman who had stood beside him, who had proven her loyalty and trust through their complex history, had simply vanished. According to spoilers for the coming weeks, Jason will receive a phone call that changes everything. The voice on the other end will be unmistakably Anna's, desperate and genuine, delivering a message that shatters the carefully constructed illusion. She has been kidnapped. She is being held captive. She needs him to come find her. There is no mission. There is no classified assignment. There is only a desperate woman reaching out to the one person she knows has the skills, the determination, and the loyalty to find her. This phone call represents a critical turning point in General Hospital's unfolding saga. It confirms that Anna's captors have made a crucial mistake, allowing her a single moment of contact with the outside world. Whether this is an oversight or a deliberate test of her compliance remains unclear, but the result is certain. Jason Morgan will mobilize with the single-minded focus of a man who never abandons those he has sworn to protect. He will call upon his network of contacts, people like Brick, Spinelli, and others who operate in the shadows of Port Charles. He will begin a methodical investigation that will eventually lead him to Windermere, to the rooms beneath the Grand Estate where Anna has been studying her captors as carefully as they have been studying her. The rescue that will change everything. What makes this storyline so compelling is that Anna's rescue is far from a simple matter of Jason arriving with guns blazing. The conspiracy round Sidwell runs too deep, touching too many people, creating too many blackmail scenarios to resolve cleanly. Sonny and Laura are already aware of Sidwell's activities. They possess photographic evidence of their involvement with a murder, evidence that Sidwell uses to keep them in his control. If Anna is simply freed and tells her story, the entire structure of blackmail and control that Sidwell has constructed would come crashing down with devastating consequences for multiple people across Port Charles. Jason will need to navigate this delicate web with care. He cannot simply rescue Anna and expect everything to return to normal. He will need to understand the full scope of what Sidwell is attempting, what Britt's laboratory experiments truly represent, and whether the conspiracy extends beyond Windermere into the highest echelons of Port Charles society. The rescue of Anna Devane will become a catalyst for a larger reckoning, one that will force multiple characters to confront the choices they have made and the consequences they must now face. Conclusion: the beginning of the end. As December 2025 unfolds, Port Charles stands on the precipice of a revelation that will shatter the comfortable illusions many have been living under. Anna's kidnapping, which everyone has been told was a routine WSB assignment, represents something far more sinister: a villain willing to hold a legendary agent captive in pursuit of impossible science. When Jason receives that fateful phone call from Anna, describing her captivity and pleading for his rescue, it will mark the beginning of a sequence of events that will reshape Port Charles in ways no one can currently anticipate. The woman who has survived decades of international espionage, who has outwitted some of the most dangerous criminals in the world, finds herself in her most precarious position, yet not because she lacks skill or intelligence, but because her captor believes he has found something invaluable in her very consciousness. As Jason prepares to mount his rescue operation, the clock begins ticking for Sidwell and everyone complicit in Anna's abduction. The endgame is approaching, and Port Charles will never be the same once the truth emerges about what has been happening within Windermere's walls. Next, we will learn about the fascinating trajectories of Port Charles' youngest generation and the compelling paths they're destined to walk. The landscape of General Hospital is shifting dramatically as we witness the evolution of several key young characters who are poised to reshape the fabric of this beloved community. These emerging adults and teenagers are navigating treacherous waters, each facing choices that will ultimately define who they become in the years ahead. The rising generation takes center stage. Port Charles has always been a town where legacy matters, where family names carry weight, and where the sins of the fathers often visit the children. Right now, we're watching some of the most promising young people in the community stand at critical crossroads in their lives. These aren't just background characters anymore, they're becoming central figures in storylines that could rival anything their parents experienced. The question on everyone's mind is whether they'll rise to meet their potential or crumble under the weight of expectation and circumstance. What makes this particularly intriguing is that several of these young people have already begun stepping into very adult situations. They're no longer dealing with high school drama or teenage romance. They're confronting real danger, making life-altering decisions, and facing consequences that will echo throughout their entire lives. Some are handling these challenges with remarkable maturity, while others are stumbling, making mistakes that could haunt them forever. Rocco and Gio's troubling journey. The storylines surrounding Rocco Falconeri and Giovanni Palmieri have taken some genuinely concerning turns this year. These two young men, who should be focused on their education and building positive futures, have instead found themselves entangled in situations that test their moral compasses. Rocco's journey has been particularly harrowing to watch unfold. The young Falconeri has demonstrated a disturbing pattern of questionable decision-making that has his family and fans alike worried about where he's headed. The incident where Rocco nearly ended his own life wasn't just a plot device, it was a stark reminder of how quickly things can spiral out of control for young people who feel trapped or overwhelmed. That near tragedy should have been a wake-up call, a moment that redirected his path towards something healthier and more positive. Instead, we've watched him continue to push boundaries, rebel against the authority figures trying to guide him, and make choices that suggest he hasn't fully processed the gravity of what almost happened. Gio's situation is equally complex and perhaps even more emotionally charged. The revelation about his true parentage sent shockwaves through his entire world, shattering the foundation of everything he thought he knew about himself. Watching him grapple with the truth about his birth and who his real parents are has revealed layers to his character that we hadn't seen before. There's a darkness lurking beneath his surface, a capacity for anger and resentment that could easily consume him if he's not careful. His grief has manifested in ways that are both understandable and deeply troubling, pushing him toward decisions that could have lasting repercussions. The dynamic between Rocco, Joe, and Danny Morgan has created a volatile combination. When these three get together, they seem to bring out each other's worst impulses rather than their best qualities. They've been caught breaking rules, defying authority, and engaging in behavior that suggests they're testing limits without fully understanding the potential consequences. It's the kind of pattern that can either be corrected with proper intervention or spiral into something far more serious. Josslyn's transformation into a super spy. Perhaps one of the most dramatic character evolutions we're witnessing is Josslyn Jack's transformation from the person we all thought she would become into someone entirely different. For years, fans had certain expectations about who Joss would be as she matured. We imagined her following a particular path, embodying specific values, and becoming a certain type of person. That vision has been completely upended by recent developments. Joss has embraced a covert life with the WSB that few could have predicted. She's not just dipping her toes into the world of espionage, she's diving in headfirst, committing to a lifestyle that puts her in constant danger and requires her to maintain elaborate deceptions. Her persona as a WSB agent is becoming increasingly sophisticated, and the parallels to a young Anna Devane are impossible to ignore. The way she carries herself, the calculated risks she takes, the ability to compartmentalize her true mission from her public life, these are all hallmarks of Anna's early days in the spy game. What's particularly fascinating about this transformation is that it seems almost inevitable in hindsight. Joss has always had that spark of determination, that willingness to fight for what she believes is right regardless of the personal cost. The WSB simply gave her a framework to channel those impulses into something bigger than herself. She's learning tradecraft, developing skills that would seem impossible for someone her age, and proving that she has what it takes to operate in one of the most dangerous professions imaginable. The question now is whether this path will ultimately fulfill her or destroy her. The spy life exacts a tremendous toll on those who choose it. Relationships become nearly impossible to maintain. Trust becomes a luxury one can't afford. The line between who you really are and who you pretend to be gets blurred until you're not sure which is which anymore. Anna has lived with these consequences for decades. Will Joss be able to handle them at such a young age? Emma as the true heir to Joss's original promise. While Joss has veered in an unexpected direction, Emma's Scorpio Drake has emerged as the embodiment of what many fans thought Joss would become. Emma represents everything pure and good about youth activism and passionate advocacy. Her commitment to animal rights isn't just a phase or a trendy cause, it's a deeply held conviction that drives her actions and shapes her worldview. She's the kind of young person who makes adults believe in the next generation's potential to make the world better. Emma's dedication to her friends showcases the kind of loyalty and emotional maturity that seems rare in today's world. She doesn't abandon people when things get difficult. She doesn't choose convenience over principle. Instead, she stands firm in her beliefs and supports the people she cares about through thick and thin. This combination of compassion, conviction, and courage makes her remarkably compelling to watch. In many ways, Emma has become the grown-up version of who we thought Joss would be. She's taking the idealistic energy that Joss once possessed and channeling it into positive action. She's proof that not every young person in Port Charles needs to choose darkness or danger to be interesting or important. Sometimes the most powerful storylines come from characters who simply try to do the right thing, even when it's difficult. The brothers Morgan Falconeri Palmieri at the crossroads. Danny Morgan, Rocco Falconeri, and Joe Palmieri represent three young men standing at pivotal moments in their development. Each of them has demonstrated both the capacity for goodness and the potential for darkness. They're good kids at their core, with warm hearts and genuine desire to do right by the people they love. But they're also dealing with trauma, grief, and circumstances that could easily push them down darker paths. Danny's storyline has been particularly heartbreaking this year. Losing his mother Sam devastated him in ways that are still unfolding. We've watched him lash out at everyone around him, not because he doesn't love them, but because his pain is so overwhelming that he doesn't know how else to express it. His anger is understandable, but it's also dangerous if it continues to fester without proper processing and support. Danny stands at a crossroads where he could either emerge from this tragedy stronger and more compassionate, or he could let his grief harden him into someone cold and unreachable. Rocco's struggles with distinguishing right from wrong have been equally concerning. He's shown flashes of the good man he could become, but he's also demonstrated troubling judgment that suggests he's not quite ready to handle the adult situations he keeps finding himself in. The fact that he nearly died should have been transformative, but instead, it seems to have left him even more confused about his place in the world. Gio's journey through grief over discovering the truth about his parentage has revealed depths to his character that are both impressive and frightening. He has the potential to become a remarkable man who uses his pain to develop empathy and understanding. But he also has the potential to let that darkness consume him, to become bitter and angry about the deception that shaped his early life. Which path he chooses will likely depend on the support systems around him and his own internal strength. Charlotte Casadini's troubling trajectory. Of all the young people we're discussing, Charlotte Casadini might be the most concerning case. She carries the weight of the Casadini legacy, and that's never an easy burden to bear. The Casadinis have a long history of producing both extraordinary individuals and absolute monsters, sometimes within the same person. Charlotte's father, Valentin Casadini, embodies this duality perfectly. He has genuine capacity for love and tenderness, particularly toward his daughter. But he's also capable of ruthless behavior and calculated cruelty when he feels threatened or wronged. Charlotte's pattern of choosing her father over stability and her mother Laura repeatedly raises serious red flags about her future. She's not just being loyal to Valentin, she's actively choosing chaos and moral ambiguity over the healthier, more stable environment that Laura could provide. This suggests that Charlotte might be more drawn to the darker aspects of the Casadini legacy than anyone wants to admit. The Casadini name has always been synonymous with power, manipulation, and a certain moral flexibility that allows them to justify almost any action. Helena Casadini terrorized Port Charles for decades. Stavros was a monster who kidnapped and imprisoned Laura. Mikos nearly destroyed the world. Even the more sympathetic Casadinis like Stefan and Alexis have made terrible choices that hurt the people around them. Charlotte has this entire legacy flowing through her veins, and her recent behavior suggests she might embrace it rather than fight against it. What makes Charlotte's situation particularly troubling is her age. She's still young enough that intervention could potentially redirect her path, but she's also old enough that her patterns are becoming ingrained. The choices she's making now are forming habits and mindsets that will be incredibly difficult to break later. If she continues down this road, constantly choosing Valentin's world over healthier alternatives, prioritizing loyalty to her father over her own well-being and moral development, she could become the next generation's great Casadini villain. The uncertain future ahead. The future of Port Charles rests partly in the hands of these young people. They'll either rise to become the heroes and leaders their community needs, or they'll succumb to the darker impulses that seem to run through so many Port Charles families. The beauty and tragedy of youth is that everything still feels possible. Redemption and ruin are equally accessible. What makes these storylines so compelling is their unpredictability. We genuinely don't know which way any of these characters will ultimately fall. Will Emma's idealism survive contact with Port Charles' harsh realities? Will Joss thrive as a spy or lose herself in the deception? Can Rocco, Joe, and Danny pull each other back from the edge, or will they drag each other down? And will Charlotte embrace her better angels or give in to the Casa Dini darkness? These questions will likely play out over years of storytelling, with twists and turns that we can't possibly anticipate. That's what makes General Hospital so addictive, the sense that anything could happen, that no character's fate is truly sealed, and that redemption and disaster are always just one decision away. The young people of Port Charles are writing their own stories now, and we're all watching with bated breath to see what they'll become.